So let's begin. I'm going to start by introducing our panelists. First, we have Tom Batley. Tom Batley was appointed the Executive Director of the Rochester Regional Photonics Clusters and the Executive Director of the New York State Photonics Industry Association in 2004. Prior to his appointments, Mr. Batley served as the Monroe County's Economic Development Director for 9 years. Mr. Batley is touted as a technology evangelist who is excited to be promoting New York State's optics and photonics industries. Mr. Batley's work for the past 3 years led to the offering of the National Network for Manufacturing Innovation and Integrated Photonics Opportunity with the Department of Defense and the Obama administration. And in July, Rochester was designated the headquarters. Thank you so much, Mr. Batley. Our next panelist is Alexis Vogt. Alexis is currently the Associate Professor and Endowed Chair at Monroe Community College in the Optical Systems Technology Department. Ms. Vogt received her PhD in optics from the University of Rochester. While working in the optics industry, such as Mel's, Brio, and Bausch alum, Ms. Vogt was recognized there was a need for optics technicians within the Rochester area. In her role at Monroe Community College, she hopes to grow the optics department by assisting individuals with training guidance, finding training-related employment, since the recent rise in demand for the Rochester area. One interesting fact about Ms. Vogt is that she was asked to write the definition of light for the World Book Encyclopedia. Cool. Next, we have Alejandro Mendoza. He has worked as a human resources manager with Optimax for the last 8 years. Mr. Mendoza received his master's degree in organizational learning and human resources development from St. John Fisher. Prior to joining Optimax, Mr. Mendoza spent over 8 years in the United States Air Force as an enlisted member before becoming a commissioned officer. Mr. Mendoza's passion and determination at Optimax allows him to collaborate within a team to fulfill their mission while having fun. And finally, we have Ross McCauley. Ross McCauley is the program manager with Monroe Community College in the Economic Development and Innovative Workforce Services. He is currently spearheading the Mechatronics program at Monroe Community College. Mr. McCauley received his bachelor's degree in business management, along with his master's degree in adult learning from Syracuse University and management from Nazareth College. Mr. McCauley started his career at Xerox Corporation and retired as the manager in corporate learning and development. Mr. McCauley started his second career working at Monroe Community College 8 years ago. He has over 40 years of experience in the industry. Please welcome our panelists. So before we begin with our list of questions, we had a debate yesterday, and we wanted to present the debate to you guys and get your feedback, and then we'll have our panelists be the final judge. So we were debating whether the word was photonics or photonics. So who here thinks it's photonics? That was me. And who here thinks it was photonics? Panelists?
Pho is a delicious Vietnamese noodle dish.
So hopefully I will be pronouncing it correctly. It is photonics, correct?
Right, because it derives from a photon of light.
Okay, very cool. Okay,
is that a particle or a wave? How do you measure it?
It's both.
Duality of light.
So again, we'll begin by asking questions. And again, the second hour we will open up the questions to you guys. So if you do have a question, there is some paperwork in front of you. Feel free to write that question down. And we'll try to get to as many questions as we can. We do have only like an hour set up for this. Okay? So let's begin. Our first question that staff had come up with was, what is photonics and what is mechatronics? And could you tell us a little bit about your background and your current specific position? Tom, we'll start with you.
That's everybody answering that one?
Oh, you can answer part of it. That's
okay.
fine.
All right. Photonics is, broadly, it's the science of capturing and manipulating and using light
For anything. So you could call the lights up here use of photonics. But photonics is also one of the most advanced photonics devices that we use on a regular basis is our phones. So the little LED light emits photons. It's a photonic device. And the little lens that captures the light that goes onto a sensor is a photonic application. But the sensor that captures the light is also photonics. And then the science of creating the sensor on silicon or by whatever means is also photonics. So what's happened is photonics has so permeated our lives so quickly that we all take advantage of it. So if I asked you, if I asked people 100 years ago if they knew what electronics was, they'd all give me a blank stare, right? But if I ask everyone in the room today what electronics is, you all kind of feel like you have a handle on what electronics are, all right? So photonics is just a new word that's emerged in the 21st century as something very important in terms of economic development and manufacturing and job growth and science, and the breakthroughs in photonics are remarkable. Now, having said all of that, I'm not a scientist. I'm sitting next to someone who's a PhD in optics from the University of Rochester. So when people ask me for my expertise in photonics, it's a little embarrassing. I dropped out of college. I've started a couple of companies. I worked in the workforce development industry. I was the economic development director at the county. And I guess what attracted me to this industry was while I was the economic development director, every week or two, there was another announcement about Kodak letting go another 3,000 or 4,000 people. And at that time, those announcements would be on the front page. And the business section of the newspaper was on the back of the sports page. Do you remember that? That really irked me. Because, in the little sidebar it would say, small manufacturing company adds 20 jobs, small service company adds 20 jobs, incrementally jobs were growing, but then you'd hear these announcements from Kodak. We're laying off 4,000 people. And did you hear on the news this morning they were interviewing Tammy Marino from the State Labor Department about job numbers? She's the one from the local DOL who was kind of like the labor analyst. Well, at the time, there was a different person in that job, and they would come out with these announcements, and what we were seeing was, even though Kodak was laying off all these people, the job numbers were going up in the Rochester region. This is during the early, mid-'90s. And we didn't understand how that was possible. How are the job numbers going up when Kodak's laying off 4,000 people here and 5,000 people there? And it was small and medium-sized companies were growing, and people who were leaving Kodak were starting companies, and people were getting together and saying, hey, here's a new market, let's start a company and do this. And in fact, one of them was, they confused me so much. A month ago, Rochester Works was emailing me and calling me, and then someone from HR Works called me, and I said, well, yeah, I'm speaking at your career panel. And they said, no, we're HR Works. And I remember we got together with them, and I remember when they started that business in about 1994, and now they employ a lot of people. So we did an analysis of these numbers, and a lot of small manufacturers emerged, and a number of them were companies like LaserMax and Sidor and companies that have since changed their name a few times. And I came to realize, I had never understood this before, that Rochester has this amazing industry based in light-based technologies. And some of it is because George Eastman made a big investment, 110 years ago or 100 years ago. Some of it is because Xerox and Bausch and Lomb were always here. Bausch and Lomb was making eyeglasses and telescopes and binoculars for the Civil War. So we have some bench depth in this industry, history of it. That's when I became aware of the industry, met people at the University of Rochester at the Laser Energetics Lab, got very excited about the optics industry. And all I can tell you is how I got to this job, which basically I'm kind of like an educational advocate and a lobbyist. If you had asked me in 1985, would I end up in this job, the notion was completely preposterous. I have no idea how I got here. Did I aim for this job? Was it an intention? Not at all. I get very enthusiastic about people who make stuff. So I've been working with manufacturing or in manufacturing or with engineers for probably 30 years. And this job kind of happened to me. So I wish I could say, as a kind of a career advice thing, what was important to get to my job? I think what was important to get to my job was I know how to work with computers really well. I know how to work with people really well. I love to collaborate with teams of people to get to a place that's really interesting and exciting to get to. And I love people who are like that, who are inspired and looking to advance a big idea. And I just happen to end up working with a lot of manufacturers because that's how they think. So I'm sorry that was so long-winded, but that's my take on optics, photonics, and how I got here.
Thanks, Tom. A couple of things that Tom didn't mention. In large part, these hundreds of optics companies within our region, about 120 small
Some of them might be
companies.
one employee, but 120.
120 within our area. Tom runs an organization called the Rochester Regional Photonics Cluster, and that is, well, I can let him speak to that, but the work he has done there is in large part why we have so many optics companies here, how we all work so nicely together, how we all are working together to see the economy within Rochester improve and see it grow. So that's a whole subset of Tom's job that he hasn't mentioned, but really is part of the reason that Rochester is as successful as it is in Rochester. So I want to make sure that that's clear as well. I will also just add a little bit to how I would describe the difference between photonics and optics. I teach at Monroe Community College. I started there a month ago, and I run the optics program. As we were mentioning at the very beginning, Kim was saying part of the reason I took this job was because I had come from industry where I saw the need for more technicians. There are 120 optics companies in Rochester, but quite frankly, we don't have enough people to work in those companies. We have too many people who have PhDs in optics and not enough people who are there as technicians who are operating machinery, who are really the driving force behind the success in these companies. And Ali is going to talk about particularly Optimax. They're a huge proponent of the optics program, and one of the main reasons that our program at MCC has done as well as it has is because of this company at Optimax. I'll leave that for him to speak to. In terms of the difference in definition between photonics and optics, photonics is in fact a made-up word. It was a word that was made up in the 1960s to sound like electronics, because as Tom was pointing out, we know what electronics is, but photonics, it has that X part of electronics, and it is studying light. It has, and that evolution, so it originally was intended to mean optics, light, where electronics meet. So the idea of a semiconductor chip that would go into your cell phone, for example. Now, the media and everything else has changed and evolved such that photonics and optics are used as synonyms for one another. So at MCC, we have a program that was started in the 1960s, and we have an optics option and we have an electro-optics option. The electro-optics option is synonymous with photonics. Photonics is just the exciting word to now use in the media. So we are changing our name to optics and photonics. So we have received many calls with people coming up to say, when is MCC going to have a photonics program? And the answer is, we do. We already do. In fact, we have had one for a really long time. So that's the exciting answer. So photonics is really a made-up word, but as you all now are very well aware, the media has caught on to this, and it's become synonymous with optics. So they can be used interchangeably in large part. By strict definition, photonics is a subset of optics. The analogy I use with my students is you could say you're going to Wegmans to go buy some vegetables, or you can say I'm going to go to Wegmans to go buy some broccoli. So broccoli would be the photonics, and vegetables would be the optics. You like that one, Tom? I'm trying to get something tangible. So broccoli is a type of vegetable. Similarly, photonics is a portion of optics. But the way that we've seen the media and others evolve now, you're safe to use them synonymously. And now we know they're called photonics, as in the photon.
But integrated photonics, which is the big thing that was in the newspaper in July, was announced on my birthday.
That's why they chose
July
that date.
29th. Yeah. Biden called me up and said, when's your birthday? So integrated photonics, though, actually has a specific application concept. And integrated photonics, one of the things that they use photonics for is to talk about lasers. Strictly speaking, the STC MEMS, the operation out there in Canandaigua off Route 332, they can take a chip. You know what a chip looks like? Ever seen a semiconductor chip, like a photo of it? So, I mean, they're really cool. If you look at them under a microscope, they look like, cities of the future. You can't believe that they can create things that small. So out there, they can actually take crude laser devices and put them on a chip. And so we've been able to do that. Most of your phone calls are transmitted over fiber optics, and they get propagated. Every once in a while, the light from the fiber optics has to get amplified, and eventually the light gets somewhere, and frequently it gets directed into a chip. Then it gets converted to electronics. But integrated photonics would be like nanoscale lasers. Lasers at such a tiny microscopic level that you really couldn't see them with your eye. And if we can transmit data at that level on chips, it has the potential to be so incredibly transformative to our lives, just like computers were. Remember before computers? Hard to remember that, but I mean, now everybody seems to be kind of computer savvy. Like your kids, if they sit down in front of a computer when they're 2.5, they don't need a user manual. Have you noticed that? Right? But I mean, when personal computing hit, it was this huge transformative thing in our lives. The reason this is so important to the Department of Defense is integrated photonics can change so much at such a broad scale in every industry, whether it's consumer products or medical devices or cell phones or lightweight things that soldiers have to carry in the field. It would make batteries last longer. It's just such a game changer. And the United States has to compete with other countries who are making huge investments in this, who want to be the leaders in this upcoming industry. And you remember, the Japanese were at the head of so much of the electronics industry and still are. So that's why this big announcement was made. Integrated photonics is a very specific application of photonics at the nanoscale and the chip level. And that's what this big announcement was about. That's distinct from, it's within Alexis's definition, but the big announcement was about that specific challenge.
Morning, everyone. Thanks for being here, for sure. Again, my name's Ali Mendoza. I'm the Human Resources Manager at Optimax. I've been at Optimax for just about 9 years. I'm not going to even touch, from a definition standpoint, what is photonics. However, Optimax is a manufacturing company that deals with the science and applications of light. We manufacture precision components, okay? And we're located right outside of Webster in the town of Ontario. And we've got a privately owned company there. We've got 275 employees, and we deal with basically manufacturing complex geometries on optical materials. So glass is a generic term. There's hundreds of different types of glass, and our niche within the industry is that we can manipulate the surfaces of these components by systems that we have in place, heavily technician-driven. We train people, and they make some of the highest quality components in the world, and it is exciting stuff. And my background was not initially in the optics or manufacturing experience. I was home on military leave, and I ran into this guy wearing a tie-dye T-shirt looking like Shrek talking about optics manufacturing. I knew nothing about it. So he was a Navy guy.
He's not kidding either.
No, I'm not. He was in the Navy, I was in the Air Force. We naturally had the rip on each other. So after bantering back and forth, he invited me out to the manufacturing facility, and 3 hours later I walked out just blown away as far as the process, the cleanliness, the systems, the technicalities of what it was they were doing, the skill sets that were required to actually do this job, and the amount of training and commitment from the company to train this workforce was something that I was really, really impressed with. Fortunately, I was offered an opportunity to join the team, and I've been there ever since. So my job and role as the Human Resources Manager now is to continue to build and develop a workforce that can handle this ever-growing demands to do things better, faster, with higher quality, and with competencies that we can train and develop within the infrastructure of this particular region. It's a very exciting time. We've hired 50 employees over the past year. We expect a continued aggressive hiring trend into the upcoming year. The resources are available in this town for continuing education, continuing development, and we are one of many companies, as you've heard, that has a really cool role within this industry, and we're continuing to grow. So, I'm looking forward to answering your questions and helping you better understand what we're about, what we're looking for, but it keeps the team and myself on our toes, and so far things have been going very, very well. We've got a lot to talk about. We also have mechatronics that's going on that I want to make sure we don't forget, because that's a very important aspect when talking about these industries, and I'm going to transition this over to Ross to talk a little bit more about that.
Ali, how many people did Optimax employ 10 years ago?
10 years ago, we had a little under 120 employees, and it's just been...
So what is, and to your credit, what is mind-boggling is when we hear those numbers, they're just numbers to us, but every one of those hires, even at 120, every one of those hires has a family, and it represents a person at some level, whether it's sales or some specific job within the company or working on a machine I'm a lobbyist, and at the end of the day I work with myself and a board of directors and the members, but I don't have to hire anybody. I'm not responsible for paying anybody. I don't have to pay their unemployment insurance. I don't have to make sure that their health insurance is managed and all that stuff. To scale from 120 to 270 people is just like an unbelievable task. Whenever I see companies doing that, I have no concept of how they manage that growth. It's mind-boggling. And still be recognized as like the best in the world at what you do. It's awesome. Every space shot that you see images from here to beyond Pluto is captured on a satellite. If it's a satellite sent from NASA to capture images. The images are transmitted, whether it's from Mars or Pluto, through lenses that were made in Ontario County at Optimax. That's cool.
Good plug.
Ross, hire this guy.
Right, that's smart. Actually, I was going to make this in comment because I know Ali and Optimax are very tremendous work. And I was going to say that the shots that you saw from Pluto were all for their cameras, their lenses, so they do some great work there. My background is I've been in manufacturing. I went to college for about 6 months and didn't like it. I wasn't used to the freedom, so I dropped out of college. My mother gave me a kick in the butt to go get a job. So at 18, I went to Xerox Corporation and got a job. I started working full-time when I was 18 in tearing down copiers. Back in those days, Xerox released copiers. They weren't selling them. So they come back, we tear them down. And along the way, I figured out that if I wanted to get anywhere, I had to go back to school. So I started going to part-time high school. Started in 1970, and I ended in 2007. I got my latest degree in 2007. I'm a real believer of lifelong learning, and I've spent the better part of 40 years in training. I went from the assembly line. I got a call one day when I was on vacation. Do you want to become a trainer? And I said, no, I don't want to. What do I know about training? So about 5 minutes later, my boss called and says, what the hell are you doing? You don't turn down a promotion. So I became a trainer and teaching people how to repair copiers. And then during that time, I started going to night school, got my degrees, and at some point became manager of employment of training at Xerox. And under that, and this is where I got my background for mechatronics. I'm going to talk about mechatronics. The only thing that I knew about optics at Xerox was that if there was a shadow on my copy, the mirror wasn't backwards. That's all I knew. That's how we could fix it. Just turn the mirror out. Since I retired from Xerox almost 10 years ago, I've learned this whole new world of advanced manufacturing and optics. I came to MCC back in 2007, 2008, and I was actually putting together training programs for optics. I put together an apprenticeship program along with Optimax and other companies for optics manufacturing technician. And now Optimax is in the process of updating that. So that's where I learned my background. When we talk about mechatronics, what we're talking about, this is talking about integrated systems. That's what mechatronics is. Mechatronics is a term that was actually started in 1971 by a Japanese company, and they actually put a trademark on it. And then a few years later, it became so popular that they lost a trademark. But the way they define mechatronics is that it's an integration of mechanical, electrical, and intelligent computer control in the design and manufacturing of components and processes. What that boils down to is anything that has mechanics and electronics in it has to do with mechatronics. That term could apply to any of them. It could be an assembly job where you're putting together a circuit board into a housing, or it could be you're designing the next space shuttle. Any of those jobs in between there can be defined as mechatronic positions. Anything that integrates mechanical, electrical, and computers. Optics in there.
There's no optics, lasers, whatever. All of those systems end up in some kind of mechatronic system, or that you can't use them.
Right, exactly. So that term, when we talk about mechatronics, and it's become popular in the last 10 years, probably, really is wide. When we talk about jobs, and we'll talk about a little later, available under the term mechatronics, there's a whole variety of them. But it really is an integration of those positions.
Okay, next question. And Alexis, I'll start with you if you don't mind. What would you recommend as far as what education or work experience would be needed within the industry? And is a college degree necessary?
I recommend the MCC Optics program. That's my recommendation. At MCC, in all seriousness, though, at MCC, we have a couple of different options, and I did put some flyers on the table in the back, right outside the door, that detail our options that we have. We offer a 1-year certificate program as well as a 2-year associate's program, and those would both position you very well to entering the optics marketplace here, to join an optics company here locally. When optics companies such as Optimax are talking about having a shortage of technicians they're generally talking about a shortage of people who have an associate's degree. So that's the 2-year program. But there is, in fact, a need for people who come out with a certificate program. There are a large number of companies, of which Optimax is leading the way, where they do a great deal of training of their employees once they are hired. So if you were to come through with a certificate program and then enter Optimax, they would have training along the way as you evolve and spend more years working with Optimax. But those are the areas in which you will enable yourself to very easily find a job in Rochester. If this is a field that sounds interesting to you, there are plenty of jobs out there. And you can do either the 1-year option, the 2-year option. The courses are outlined on the information sheets that are in the back. So a little bit of a description about what you would be taking in order to get an optics degree. There's math associated with it. We have our own optics classes where we're talking about how light behaves. Light behaves as a ray, light behaves as a wave. We have courses devoted towards this. We also do a lot of hands-on work so that you have experience operating machinery. So when you go out to Optimax, you will be familiar with the type of equipment that you'd be using, and that you can then very quickly come up to speed on their processes there. I do want to just also mention little bit more about what Tom was talking about, the importance of optics in Rochester. So the award in which we received in July on Tom's birthday, thanks to Joe Biden and others, is in large part because of the great amount of work that Tom and only a handful of other people put together in writing this very comprehensive grant proposal that we were eventually then awarded. But a lot of the work that they were incorporating in that proposal was highlighting the history that Rochester has in optics. Because of Bausch & Lomb, Kodak, Xerox, Rochester is the birthplace of optics in all of North America. Not New York City, not LA, not Miami, but Rochester, New York. The Institute of Optics, of which I graduated from at the University of Rochester, was started in 1929 with money that was provided from Kodak and Bausch & Lomb. It became the first place in the entire country where you could study optics. It's now one of only a handful of places in which you can study optics. So it's known worldwide as being the forefront position and location and place to study optics. The MCC optics program that was started in the 60s was the first program in optics in the entire country that was started for technicians, for people to come in and receive an associate's degree in optics. So we have an extraordinarily rich history of optics right here in Rochester. And as the Kodak downsizing occurred that Tom alluded to, the fascinating part is that those people, the intelligence, everything stayed right here in Rochester. So if you think about Detroit, when the automobile industry fell apart, Detroit subsequently crumbled. What's very unique about Rochester is when Kodak fell apart, maybe some of you are former Kodak employees here, when Kodak fell apart, the intelligence, the people, they stayed here, just came into a new life. And that's why we now, rather than having one huge employer being Kodak, we now have 120 small companies, some of which only have a handful of people. But the people, the intelligence, the knowledge, all remains right here. And it's those companies that now need all of you to work at them. And that's why we have a very strong and growing program at MCC, of which would be a wonderful place, and we welcome all of you to come join.
Incidentally, if you look at the graduates of the MCC optics program since it began, there's about 750 of them, something like that total. And they work all across the country. Those that are still in the workforce, that haven't retired or whatever, work everywhere across the country. They work at Lockheed Martin and Northrop Grumman in Florida and Arizona. They work in Southern California. They work all over the country. They work around Rochester. Optimax, Allie's company where he works, was started by a guy who started with a 2-year optics degree from MCC. Sidor Optics, Jim Sidor, this is the CEO, has a 2-year optics degree from MCC. His 2 sons are getting optics degrees from MCC. They're taking classes at MCC. So people from MCC are all over the place, and they're doing all kinds of things. They own their own companies. They work at aerospace companies, defense companies, biomedical companies. So it kind of depends on, the person, their ambition, their willingness to work, they're everywhere. And so Corning is now a big sponsor of the MCC optics program. It used to be Kodak, but Corning chose to sponsor the program because the head of worldwide manufacturing and product quality at Corning came to Rochester and said, I was up in my Canton operation in northern New York, and I said, are you having good luck recruiting new technicians? Where are you getting new talent? And they said, well, we used to get it from Rochester, but it seems Rochester's not making it anymore. It's because the optics program at MCC was on the slide because Kodak had stopped putting people in the seats. So Corning said the smart thing to do is sponsor the program, get some new talent into the program, start recruiting again. And so this is a company, sure, they have maybe 200 employees in Fairport, but they have an operation in Canton. They have people all over the country. And Corning said, this program is so important, we're giving it $500,000 to make it, to rebirth it. And that's what happened.
Where do I begin? So, from an educational standpoint, the opportunities are endless. And Optimax, for example, pays 100% of education. Education is extremely important. Ross mentioned lifelong learning. That is an expectation at Optimax. We understand a lot of people just aren't ready to quite jump back into the academic-based environment. But what we've found is that when we hire them and bring them on, they quickly find out how much they don't know about something, and that can be really good motivation to take advantage of the settings and systems to help increase those competencies and understandings from a cause and effect relationship. That is critical from an educational standpoint. We need people to understand the impact and the reasons, the fundamental whys as to why things are happening the way that they are. So at Optimax, we've got these manufacturing cells that are established, okay? And a manufacturing cell, it follows the lean process and philosophy of managing a process from start to finish. So as a technician, you learn to generate, grind, polish, and inspect. So you're managing your quality, you're interfacing with traditional and non-traditional ways of making these components. And we need people to understand what is happening between these sequences. The academic pathways that exist here provide very good fundamentals to help people understand why things are happening the way that they are. So it is common at Optimax when we hire someone who's a little bit apprehensive about going back to school just because it's been so long, we find that they quickly enroll. And we've got a very good relationship with MCC that allows students to get enrolled quick and transition into the programs. And what we have found is that it has been a very positive because it can be directly applied to what it is that we're doing at Optimax. So bottom line, lifelong learning is an expectation. Okay, you don't have to jump in and go right into school, but what we found is based on our processes, you end up self-selecting to go because of just the technicalities of what it is we're doing.
One of the things I'm doing right now at MCC is putting together a mechatronics certificate program. And the way I was saying earlier, there's a whole variety of jobs that falls under that title. The one that we're choosing at MCC, and the one that we're going to develop our training around, is for automated equipment technicians. There's all these machines out there that have to be maintained. There's the high-tech CNC centers, the Ladestria with their food production, North American Brewery with their production lines. We talk about the operators, but we never talk about maintaining that equipment. There's millions and millions of dollars of equipment in there. So what MCC decided to do, and what I'm doing right now, is we're putting together a mechatronics certificate. It will be a one-year certificate that will have the skills in there to maintain a mechatronics system. They'll learn what hydraulics and pneumatics are about. They'll learn how to operate, how the machines operate mechanically. They're going to get basic electronics. They're going to get understanding in PLCs, programmable logic controls, which are, when we talk about the intelligent control units, they control the production system. And so that course, right now, I'm in the process now of putting together the courses, getting it approved through SUNY. And it will be a one-year degree, which will be part of our 2-year applied integrated technology program, which is a multi-skilled trade. Manufacturing, these jobs, we would call them multi-skilled. Not only do we do electrical, mechanical, optics, or whatever, compared to the street. Some companies, you have an electrician, you have a mechanical guy, you have somebody that does something else. But these jobs are going to create a multi-skilled person who will go in there and fix the problems, fix the machine when it's down. Because if a machine goes down, the desk, and they've got sauce in the process that they're filling 100 bottles a minute, and all of a sudden it stops. What are they going to do with all the production? What are they going to do with all the lost revenue? So what we're doing at MCC is, again, taking it from the point of view of machine repair. And what's happened is, the reason we're doing that is because we've lost a whole generation of skilled trades. So the last generation, we told our kids, go get your 4-year degree program, come back with your $100,000 debt, and go work at McDonald's. Okay? And we know, and what's happening... Yeah. Well, and what's happening, and what's creating that push right now is that everybody that's repairing machines looks like me. Old, gray-haired, and ready to retire. And when they leave, there's nobody back there to fill them. Every day we're getting calls from manufacturers looking for, send me somebody who can help maintain my equipment. So that's going to be
it's like plumbers and electricians. Can any of you give me the name of an electrician I could call? It's
so
like,
yeah. Got a couple out there. So the education. No.
But I mean, and they're all kind of our age. There's not a lot.
So at MCC, it'll be a 1-year certificate in mechatronics. If you want to go for your associate degree, it'll be a 2-year program. There are other programs out there. FLCC has a very good program. They call it mechatronics, but it's more towards electrical assembly. They're getting math, they're getting blueprinting, they're learning how to solder, they're learning how to do assembly work. So at the other end, there's RIT has a degree called mechatronics engineering, but you have to have a bachelor's degree to get into it because they're designing the systems. So depending on where you are and what you want to be doing, if you're looking, the question is how much education is needed. Anywhere from a 6-week training to 8 years of degree. It depends on where you want to go and what you want to do. And the automated equipment technician is going to be a career for the next few years that's going to be in high demand.
I want to ask Ali a question, because we're talking about, we've been talking specifically about people who make stuff, like working engineers, and we have some estimate, rule of thumb, for every engineer you need 6 or 8 technicians, something like that. But in a manufacturing enterprise, it's not only engineers and technicians. So how many? What's the percentage cut at, let's say, at Optimax? And you're a very lean enterprise, but I mean, they're making stuff, but somebody has to sell the stuff, right? Somebody has to take the order. Somebody has to maintain the IT systems. Like Ross is saying, somebody has to maintain the equipment, the factory. They're very sophisticated factories. So what would you say the percentages in terms of front office, sales, management versus manufacturing in the company?
Sure. So we've got about a 2-to-1 ratio of manufacturing technicians to support.
Oh, okay. And how about in sales, marketing, management?
Sure. So sales, we've got we have a small sales team. Okay. This isn't, we don't work out of a catalog. Okay. We are a build to print shop. So our customers come to us with a blueprint and say, can you build this? So we don't like to say no. We're constantly accepting work that no one else wants to do. So we've got to really leverage our capabilities, but our understanding of our limitations as well, from an equipment standpoint, from a knowledge standpoint. So it requires a lot of group selling techniques. It's not just this segmented sales department that doesn't interface with engineering and manufacturing. It is very heavily team-based selling approaches to what it is we do.
The number that used to get kicked around was 127. For every idea, you need 1 engineer, 2 technicians, and 7 operators to make it happen. The lean manufacturing number may come down a little bit, but that's the number that used to get kicked around, 127 for the ratio.
So do any of your salespeople, did they come off the shop floor and become salespeople? I know one of them is a cop because I bump into him at the airport. He tells me to move my car, and he's a salesman for Optimax.
Yeah. So again, a lot of the sales personnel that we have evolved from a manufacturing standpoint, and it really helps when talking with customers so that they can truly understand what it is that we need to do, or else just, again, the capabilities and limitations. We do bring people on board, and we train them and get them familiarized. We've got rotation programs that gets the sales team exposed to all the various aspects of the business, but it's about relationship management. When it's all said and done, we're talking about dealing with people and understanding processes and how to communicate effectively with people. When you can figure out how to do that, man, you can make extraordinary things happen. That's something that I think Optimax has done really well. We're still learning how to do it more effectively as we continue to grow. It's not a perfect system, but it is an integrated system that requires a lot of different people working together.
That actually segues to my next question. What are some potential career opportunities within this field, and what specific job titles would our job seekers look for if they wanted to get into this field? And we'll start with you.
Question. Sure. So, can y'all hear me okay in the back? We're looking for precision optics manufacturing technicians. That is really important. We're looking for engineers as well. Okay, and these are applied engineering technicians. Looking for engineers to actually continue to evolve into our manufacturing work cells to help us, like I said, understand that cause and effect relationship with things. So we in the past have taken a little bit non-traditional routes on hiring folks, okay? Musicians, artists, chefs, and gamers have done very, very well at our company with, there's a heavy artisan aspect to doing what it is that we do. So from a hand-eye coordination standpoint, just understanding or a visualization of a start to finish standpoint, you think about a chef who has to manage multiple things going on at once. You think about, gamers who have that left brain, right brain interface where they can very good dexterity and just hand-eye coordination. You think about finicky musicians, being able to play an instrument while being able to know what's coming ahead and being able to monitor and adjust. There's just that sense of being picky and being nitpicky and understanding that there's something coming next has been a really neat thing for us to leverage at Optimax. However, as we've gotten into more complex jobs and requirements, we need to continue to build our technical fundamentals, and that's where the engineering resources and that's where the academic programs that exist really help us continue to raise the bar. Because if you don't understand why you're doing something or why something's happening the way that it is, then we're really missing out. And because of the nature of the technical work that we get into, that's going to continue to be an issue for us. So
that was manufacturing 50 years ago. Something arrives, you do something to it, hand it to someone else. You don't even care what it's going to be used for or what the design is. Today, it doesn't work like that. Everybody knows what they're trying to get to, why it has to be done this way. They have to relate to one another.
Yep. So manufacturing engineers, optical technicians, quality and metrology technicians, as well as machine maintenance technicians is something that we're really finding a need for as we continue to grow.
So quality and metrology. Can you and Ross talk to that? Because you go into these manufacturing operations and you see, the shop floor is very busy and people are moving around, but a lot of them, they have a separate room for inspection. And you go in there and it's kind of dark and really quiet. And there's people working with, microscopes and, magnifying glasses, and they're in these lit hoods that are keeping the area clean and dust free, and they might be wearing a mask. So you look at that and you think they look like they're working in a hospital. They don't look like they're working in manufacturing. So talk to metrology and inspection.
Sure. So, we use sophisticated instruments to measure the surface qualities or how good we can make these surfaces. And I guess as an example, we deal with units such as fringes. Okay, so imagine taking out one of your hairs, cutting it into 100 pieces, and taking one of those pieces out. We deal with tolerances that are that small. Okay, these components are going into systems that need to work right. Okay, they're paying us very good amounts of money for these particular components, and they need to perform as expected. So from a metrology and quality standpoint, we need people who can operate machinery and who can communicate when things are good, when things are not good, but also interpret the data. Our customers require a tremendous amount of information that validates that our components are as good as we say they are, but also to meet their specifications on the blueprints. So it's a complex process, but something that without good quality technicians, without good metrology technicians, we're only using our word. We need to be able to demonstrate that with valid data.
Yeah, metrology is an important thing because you've got to build a right to the customer spec. You got to know how to measure it. You got to know how to make sure that it's in spec. And that's what we teach a lot of that. We start something as simple as using a scale, using a micrometer, to being able in the optics industry to use a interferometer, where you're looking at a cross section of an image. To me, it looks like the Rocky Mountains, and they're telling me it's out by a couple of wavelengths, something I can't even imagine. But talking about job titles downstairs, I came in. I always like to see what's available. There's this magazine. There's this out downstairs called Recruiting. If you open it up, there's a job description for an optical technician, what Ollie's been talking about. It talks about the skills that are needed. You turn to the next page, and it's a maintenance technician, mechatronics. Person that deals with electrical control panels, plumbing, hydraulics, pneumatics, mechanical operating systems. Those are some of the basic job titles that you're looking at. We get requests every day. Here's one that's called maintenance technician from a company looking with 2 years degree program. Here's one that's called senior mechanic, maintenance mechanic, machine repair, maintenance electrical mechanical technician. Another definition for mechatronics.
Okay, I want to ask the women in the room, just the women. When you hear technician, what were some of those other words, Ross? Mechanic and all that.
Maintenance.
Do you automatically think not for me? I mean, right? You're wrong.
Yeah.
There's more and more women working in the industry, and you're not fixing cars. When they say mechanics, you're not fixing cars. Okay, and particularly in metrology and inspection, I would say it's dominated by women, right?
Yep.
Because, the guys are only so patient for so long to look, and they're like, it looks good enough to me. And then it goes back into metrology. And so I know that there's I've been around the block a few times. I know there's this predisposition that women hear those terms, technician, mechanical, things like that, and you might necessarily think, oh, that's for guys. It's not for guys. And in fact, the same is true at the PhD level in our industry. If you have kids and you're trying to encourage them on career paths in the future, I mean, this is why we are so tickled to have Alexis as a professor at MCC, because she's got a PhD. And to me, she looked like she might have just gotten out of high school, right? But I mean, she's a role model, so that's what's exciting. That's what's so exciting about it. Plus, she's fun to work with. She wants to get stuff done. So I just wanted to interject that because it's not what you think when you hear mechanics and technician.
And that's a good point, because today it is heavily male-dominated industry, and there is a push to get more women into those businesses, into that industry. Did you have any insight on quality metrology?
One thing I would say when we throw the word metrology around, just to be clear, that means measuring. So when you make something, you need to be able to measure it. The phrase that we frequently use in optics is, if you can't measure it, you can't make it. So you may think you're making something that is just perfect, exactly what the customer is looking for. But if you don't have a way to measure it and to verify that, in fact, it is just perfect, it's not just perfect. So in our program, we do spend a great deal of time working with instruments such as interferometers that Ross mentioned. So those are very sophisticated instruments that are used to measure the surface profile and the light traveling through the optics to make sure that they, in fact, were designed as intended. One of the ways that we survive and do really well at MCC and still can have a low tuition compared to some of the neighboring colleges and universities in Rochester is through donations. We work very closely with industry members, not only in Rochester, but outside of the Rochester area as well, because again, I mentioned the importance that Rochester has played in the development of optics in the entire world. So we have a very sophisticated interferometer, $65,000 piece of equipment that was donated to us by an optics company called Zygo, and they make interferometers. So we have companies outside of the Rochester area who are very much interested in seeing our program thrive because we need people around the entire country. We have some very impressive lab facilities. More than 50% of the time that people spend within our program is spent using your hands, working on the lab, so we can teach you the theoretical part, but ultimately we want you to be able to understand how to apply this so that you are well prepared to go over to Optimax or to go to Sidor or other places. So more than 50% of the time is spent working with your hands. We have equipment that was donated, I mentioned, from Zygo. We have a few other machines that have been donated by other or at reduced cost from other companies around the country. Just last week, in fact, we had people from Google, who everyone's trying to get in to work at Google. Google was at MCC, and we were giving them a tour of the optics program that we have, and they were blown away by the labs that we have. They haven't been anywhere else in the entire world and seen the equipment that we have available for our students to work with and to be trained on. So we have Google asking us to help them find summer interns and ultimately then find people who will work as full-time employees at Google. So we're attracting the likes of Google.
You're
not
encouraging people to move away from here?
No, I'm encouraging Google to come move here. I made that clear, in fact.
One last question, and then we'll open up to you. What can a seasoned worker do to be more competitive in this field? And Ross, we'll start with you.
Thank you. I think it's again it's education. There are various programs where you can go and get some additional education, depending on what skills you had in the past. What you grew up doing. You could always add on to them. A lot of these, what we're talking about today, are jobs that require what we call the middle skill jobs. They require more than a high school, but less than a 4-year degree. So there are a number of programs available where you can go take a class here, If you're interested in something, take a mechanics class or take a class that's something that you're interested in. But I think that really is going to be what it is. You've got to increase your knowledge base and then get into these programs. If you're an auto mechanic, if you've been an engineer, if you've been a nurse, somebody that has worked well with their hands and with their minds, you can put those together. These jobs we're talking about require both. It's not something where you have to be super brainiac or you've got to be really good with your hand. You've got to be able to use both of those to resolve problems, to build product, to work with, as I say, in teams. Nobody's talked about the need for soft skills. We've talked a lot about the educational portion. But you know what employers' first question is when they call us for references? Was a student there every day on time? It's not what was their grade. It wasn't how well did they turn the part, how well did they grind their lenses. They were there every day on time, because if you're not there, you can't help them make product. And that's what they're in business for. And that's what I think, so as we talk about, getting more skill, and that's where I think a seasoned person brings to that is we've gone through it. We know how to talk to people. We're not necessarily always on our cell phones texting and can't spell English. Those are the things that we as seasoned can bring to them as mentors. It's another area that there's a lot of companies out there, a lot of their, I think there was a question about networking. How can you help? Being a mentor to somebody, because because you've got a lot of experience behind you. So figure out what are transferable skills to the industry you want to go to. You may have to get some additional education, but not a lot of it. MCC, as Alexis was saying, is very reasonable. Many companies will pay for tuition once you get into them. It's a lifelong learning, and that's the boat that I sail on, is lifelong learning.
I would say relationship building. I would a good place to start would be the New York Photonics website. You just type New York Photonics into any search engine, you'll end up on our website. There's a list of companies there. We try and keep it comprehensive, but sometimes it's not perfect. But do research about the companies. We've got somewhere between 80 and 120 companies that employ about 15,000 people in the region that we consider photonics, advanced manufacturing, but in our realm, we call them optics and photonics companies. And they all do different stuff. It's just shocking what the breadth is. We have people who are doing, making virtual reality headsets. We have people that are, every 3D movie that you've seen is projected through optics that are made in Rochester. Biomedical devices. It's the filters, just filters on glass. It's an entire market into itself. So get to know something about the company, get to know something about the industry. So when you call and you end up talking to somebody like Allie, you're trying to get to know one another. Find out what the company's goals are. Find out the kind of people they're looking for. It's a relationship thing where you're trying to find out if there's a fit. And it's not just a fit for them, it's a fit for you. So I'd say relationship building. Any salesperson who's trying to sell something makes it a point to know more about their customer before they call the customer. And the customer knows about the customer. You give them insights about their business. So learn about the industry, learn about the companies, and build relationships. There's lots of networking opportunities. Tours. We used to try and keep a calendar of tours, but it was so impossible because tours were popping up everywhere. School tours, company tours, and we couldn't get everybody to send us their information about their tours. But their optimax had to employ unique strategies to grow to 270 people in their industry. What it used to be, you thought you had to interview 100 people to hire 2 or something like that. But you can cut through that process by learning more about the company, going on tours, and kind of preparing yourself for the conversation.
Yeah, you bring up great points. I mean, from an interview standpoint, you're going to find, at least at Optimax, these are not panel-driven interviews. These are one-to-one based conversations. And you can come in with all of the technical and educational fundamentals in the world, but you can quickly determine if, from an interpersonal standpoint, if it just isn't a good fit. So the diversity of companies that exist based on their missions, based on, high volume versus high intensity. I mean, you have a certain ideal work environment that you can leverage that complements your style, that complements how you like to do things. If you try to force yourself into an environment that doesn't make a good fit, at least the team at Optimax has ways that we really look at that. Okay, we will bring somebody on board who is entry level because of an interpersonal standpoint where they get it. They get the mission, they get the philosophy with our company versus somebody who is just glowing on paper yet has just the interpersonal dynamics that'll create more trouble than not. And that is really, really important. To Tom's standpoint, do your homework. There's a lot of information that you can gather about what are companies what are they leveraging? What's their brand about? Have they won awards? What's the work environment like? You really need to make that a priority before even walking in, before even reaching out, because if you don't do that, I think you're really missing out on an opportunity to make sure that you're working with the right group of people. You know, the 21st century technician today requires more than just having good math skills. You need computer skills. You need to be aware of latest technologies, emerging markets. There's this collective amount of information that you need to be prepared to have a discussion about to make sure that it's a right fit. I understand it. You need a job. You've got to live. You've got to survive. However, companies are putting more and more efforts to making sure that if interpersonally it's not going to be a good fit, then companies won't move forward on that.
Thank you so much. So now we're going to open up the questions to you, the audience. Miranda is going to go around. If you do have a question, feel free to raise your hand. Make sure you just talk clearly into the microphone so that the camera can actually pick up your question. And then we'll have you ask the questions to the panelists. We are limited with time, too, so just make sure your questions are brief and one question per person. So let's begin. Does anyone have any questions for our panelists?
Ellie, you indicated that, or I think, Tom, you mentioned that Optimax interviews 100 people to hire 2. Is that still the trend? And if so, why? Or why is it so stringent?
I don't think that's the current trend. It was, though. We've taken a much more different approach with our interview process and our selection process, our pre-screening process, to make sure that when we bring somebody in, it's a 2 to 3 hour process. So there's personality profile assessments involved, there's aptitude assessments involved, and there's a lot of one-to-one based dialogue where we can determine a lot more effectively if it's going to be a good fit. So I would say prior to, that was a valid ratio as far as, you know, how to get to hire a couple people versus the amount of applications that come in. It's been drastically reduced at this point.
I've been seeing in the news that they're looking to house the Photonics building downtown, but you mentioned there's many smaller companies in the Rochester area. So what exactly is going to be in that building? I'm not exactly clear on that.
Yeah. Well, go for it,
Take
Tom.
a deep breath, Tom.
So,
It's your birthday.
So, you know, we had our annual meeting about a month ago, and this outside expert, we invite outside experts in because it's nice to know how people see you from the outside world. We invited this guy in from Silicon Valley who works in our industry, studies our industry, and he said, here's what you got with the AIM Photonics Institute, the thing that was announced. You have about $650 million committed. And arguably, excuse me, with a $650 million commitment, you could leverage that to more money. I mean, there's a lot of people who want to see integrated photonics develop. But he said, you have about a 5-year window to take whatever money you've got and create something that has not been created yet. There's a lot of research out there and, you know, labs and universities and whatever. There's partners in this thing from all around. MIT, Columbia, U of R, RIT, SUNY Polytech, University of California in Santa Barbara. These are all people who are really good at doing some little thing in a lab. But we have 5 years, the DoD has given us 5 years to come up with a way of making something that has not yet been made and commercialize it. So where you can actually put it in a product. And, you know, what would the product be? Who knows? Say, the one I like to use because it hits everybody between the eyes is if you had a photonic chip in your cell phone, you know, a charge on your cell phone might last a month or 2 months instead of, you know, barely a day. So where's that device going to go? So, so really, it's a huge technological challenge, and you're starting with people who make chips, semiconductors. You know, they take silicon wafers, these disks that are highly polished, and then through a photonic process and etching process, they create semiconductors, and then they chop them up into little pieces and put them in a plastic package with some pins on it, and it ends up in your computer and your car and your cell phone and all these devices. Well, this device that we're talking about, nobody makes them yet. You know, they're starting to make some rudimentary ones, whatever. So there really is no manufacturing yet. You know, it's what's happening is the scientists, and God bless us, the scientists are the smartest people in this industry in the country, and that's why they gave them the grant. And they are competing with the smartest scientists in the industry in other countries, you know, Japan, China, Singapore, Germany, France, whatever. And they all go to international conferences together and share their research. But at this stage, you've got a bunch of scientists who are meeting with one another and saying, well, you know what, we both do this, but you are so good at it, and you've got these students in your pipeline that are good at this, and you're going to be able to do more effective research on this. Why don't we actually send these pieces of equipment to you, and we might even send some faculty to you, and you can focus on developing this, whereas we're good at doing this. And so the scientists are all kind of sorting out, and this is happening, it's not happening in the newspaper, because it's not a real estate deal. This is like who you want working on this stuff. If you want America to be competitive in this industry, they're working on it. There. So the scientists are sorting that out. On the administrative side, I think that Joel Seligman, the president of the University of Rochester, probably regrets that in his enthusiasm for downtown Rochester on the day of the announcement, he says, that's right, and it's going into Sibley's. Because everyone that was there at the time went, what did he just say? Who's going into Sibley's? Because that's the question, is like, who's going into Sibley's? Well, the manufacturing processes probably won't be gearing up for a year or two. You know, they're finally going to start developing some new machines and begin to do stuff on the manufacturing part. It's not even going to begin within the next year. So then you think, well, what do they need the offices for? Well, conceivably, they need the offices for maybe like what Alexis said. We're working on integrated photonics. Do you think Google might be interested in integrated photonics? You know who else is really interested in integrated photonics? Facebook. Why? Because every time we log into our computers and go to a website or something, it goes through fiber optics to a server farm. Have you ever seen, you know what a server farm looks like? It's just like there's hardly any humans in there. There's just some maintenance people, and then there's these stacks of, they look like computers. They get incredibly hot. They suck a lot of electricity. One of these, I heard some ridiculous estimates of the amount of electricity server farms, because of the internet, what they suck in America. And so all of these companies are interested in seeing integrated photonics get manufactured. So I think that the reason that the argument over where it belongs happened was because of some premature enthusiasm about where it ought to go. And then other people thinking, well, if we're creating this new technology and we know who the customers might be, we want the absolute slickest, sexiest office we can. So if we're inviting Facebook, Google, you know, big companies to town to say, will you partner with us on this development, that they could set up an office in Rochester, and that we have an office for them in Rochester. So I think all of that has been premature. If we had an office right now, I don't think they'd have anybody to move into it. but I am lobbying for the corner office on the 26th floor that looks out down the Genesee River. But literally, I don't think there's anybody to move into that office yet. So in the future sometime, yes. Today, I think it's incredibly premature. And if this ends up in the newspaper, I'll hunt you down and kill you.
Well, thanks for clearing that up, because prior to coming to this panel, I assumed it was going to be a building there, the jobs were going to be there, and that's where you'd be located and working. So, but then after coming to the panel and learning about the smaller companies, I wasn't clear on that. So basically, from what I understand, you're saying they're going to got the $55 million grant, and they're going to decide what to house there.
650 million. And 105 of that is DOD money. 250 million of that is state money, and the remainder is private money from companies that want to see this happen. And the faster that we can get the scientists organized and saying, okay, we've broken it down into these segments, this is what we're working on, and we need partners to help us, geez, that could become 1.5 billion. It's huge. It has huge potential for Rochester, but it's not. Believe me, I was the only person after the news leak that was talking on the TV and the radio about it. And people, you can look, it's very easy to find my phone number, and there's only one phone number. And I get phone calls weekends, nights, whatever, that like career counselor phone numbers. And I want to encourage that enthusiasm, whether it's you wanting to work in the industry or you trying to guide your children into a scientific endeavor or maker fairs or whatever, because that's Rochester's future. We make stuff, and I'm enthusiastic about us making the next things. But today, there's no place to look for that with integrated photonics yet. But there's a lot of opportunity in all the other companies that are working in this industry right now.
Thank you very much.
Just to follow up on that, in that announcement, they identified the East Business Park as a manufacturing site. So that's where they're looking, the old Kodak Park area. That was identified as the third leg of that, was the manufacturing site was over there. And you mentioned the Makers Fair. I don't know how many people know about this.
You know what maker fairs are?
There's a movement called Makers. And what they do is they're people that just play around with and work with electronics. They work with very innovative ideas. And the Rochester, this is just a plug, is having a mini Makers Fair on November 21st downtown at the convention center. If you go Google Rochester mini Maker Fair, they'll talk about who's coming. There's 100 some odd different folks are going to be there with some really unique ideas, and it's really a really great. And there are a lot of those around here. There's
it's like a culture. It's a culture.
It's a culture.
We're trying to grow the ecosystem and the culture of people who like to work with ideas and making stuff, because that's what Rochester has always been really good at, and we still have a lot of people who are really excellent in it.
And may I just add one quick point to that? I keep getting asked, Tom keeps getting asked, others do as well, how many jobs are going to be created through this AIM Photonics Institute? And Tom just gave a very thorough, clear explanation for why we don't know the answer to that question quite yet. But we can both already tell you that this award has been a huge success to us in Rochester, because if for no other reason, you all now know what the word photonics means. You've heard this word before. And so Tom has tirelessly for years been here trying to build up the MCC optics program, trying to promote optics in Rochester, trying to beg and plead for more optics technicians to come through.
Summer camps.
Yes, summer camps that we've created for high schools.
Yeah.
We've done a great, yes, Ross, Tom and I have all worked on creating summer camps for high school students to then understand what optics is and to hopefully then go to MCC through that. So if nothing else, we've had tremendous success simply by being named the winners of this award, because it's brought all of you into these seats. We now are able to have the media helping us promote the optics community in Rochester.
And incidentally, solar panels, photovoltaics, that's photonics, right? You're making these things, that you aim at the sun, and the sun is raining down photons, and you capture the energy from the sun and you turn it into electric, right? So this big announcement of the stamp facility that the governor talked about in Genesee County, that's a photonic announcement. We look at that and we go, oh, so they're going to be making solar panels at this location. Samsung is one of the participants. They're going to be making solar panels in Genesee County. What was the big win for moving to that location in Genesee County? It's just on the very eastern edge of where you can get the most competitive electricity in the country from Niagara Falls, from the Niagara power source. So it's one of the strategic advantages that New York has. So that if they had decided that they wanted to put it in Hamlin, wouldn't fit. You couldn't do it. If they wanted to put it any place on the west side of Monroe County, no, it doesn't fall within that area. So the furthest east you could go and locate is that area north of Batavia where they're planning to do this plant. And they're investing a couple $100 million in that. And to us, that's photonic.
So you have in this room, you've got salespeople, you've got engineers in this room, you've got accountants, you've got administrative folks. All of us, whatever our roles are looking for some sort of clearinghouse for what those jobs are. It's very decentralized, it sounds like. So
is there try and do it through our website, but we couldn't even get our members to post the jobs on the website. They'd say, well, we're already posting them with the DOL, and we're already posting them with, this online service and that online. So it's really hard.
So a clearing, some sort of clearinghouse or clearing, obviously a website seems like the obvious answer to that. But that effort would, both solve the where do I go question and the manufacturer's question of, well, where can I find the candidates? It seems, that seems like an effort that also should be addressed constructively in this.
So let me ask my colleague Ross. This is not. First, the job market is so elastic, and that's like a euphemism for saying sometimes there's a lot of jobs, sometimes there's no jobs, right? I worked on this effort with the Tooling and Machining Association. And we built the Applied Technology Center out in Henrietta and started recruiting people for the manufacturing industry. And we got a lot of people in the pipeline, and they started working, and then a recession hit in the late 90s. It tanked, and all these layoffs occurred. And then people turned to us and said, you lied to us, you told us that this was a good job, and we went through the program, and then now I got laid off. I can't do anything about that. I can tell you during the recession, I'm a lobbyist, so I get about half of the money that I do from that to pay me and for what I do from industry partners who pay dues, and the rest of it I get from scrambling and doing events and applying for grants and doing whatever I can. During the recession, for 2 years, I made 50% of my annual salary. I know what it feels like when the economy tanks. But I think between, and incidentally, I think I'm on the WIB board now. So, you got to be careful when you offer me a job like that. Because I think that's where fame came from, isn't it? I think the people in Wayne County asked Mike Mandina, the president of optimax, to be on the WIB board. And Mike Mandina is not a guy who says, sure, I'll be a placeholder on your board. Mike Mandina goes in there and says, well, what do we need to do? We got some problems here. Where are some gaps? What can I work on while I'm on your board to make stuff happen? So your idea about the clearinghouse makes perfect sense. You'd think in the world of the internet, it would be easy to accomplish something like that, to let people know. But sorry, Allie, but you're the manufacturer at the table. Do you actually post specific jobs like on Craigslist or People Finder or Monster or anything like that? Or do you just say Optimax is hiring and just field the calls as they come in? What's the process? How could I get you to post your jobs at a central location like MCC or through our website?
We do. We use all avenues that we can, including career services, Rochester Works, Craigslist, Fame that was briefly mentioned, the Finger Lakes Advanced Manufacturing Enterprise, okay, which is a consortium of manufacturing companies within the Finger Lakes region, which is trying to deal with the skilled labor shortage. So getting together, collaborating, establishing best practice. They do have a website where roles and jobs are posted. We rely heavily on word of mouth, and it's still it is still a challenge for us. There's not one sole entity that we use. We try and spread out as much as we can.
So their technique is decentralized. So that by its very nature, the way that they have to reach out into the community, so then you and I get together and say, okay, so how are we going to create a clearinghouse where we take 80 companies that attract employees like that and figure out how to create a central location for job seekers? It's incredibly messy, but it's like something that you can't give up on doing it. It's basically outreach. So, like I said, I'm new on the WIB board. I was on the WIB board 15 years. The Workforce Investment Board. So it's a federal and state requirement that when you have job training dollars coming into a community, that you have a board of directors of people that oversee how the money is spent and talk about where the industry needs are. And so having me be the head of the cluster and on the WIB board at the same time and working so close with MCC, maybe we can do something about that. I mean, we've made efforts in the past. They were not always successful. But I know that good stuff comes out of it. I know people end up getting connected with the right people as a result of the effort. So, point taken.
On the MCC website, if you go to the MCC website and you go to A to Z index, we do have a job connection page that have quite a few jobs. We get a lot of the employers are starting to send their jobs to that. We post them there. We post them at our training centers. But that's another connection, is through the job connection page on the MCC website. And Tom also mentioned RTMA, which no longer known as the Tooling Association, is now the Rochester Technology and Manufacturing Association. They have changed their title. So, but they also have a web page with members listed, and some of the members will then list their jobs on there also. So there are a couple of that, and obviously Rochester Works, all the one-stop career centers have lists of it. But you're right, the need to kind of centralize that is there, and it's going to be a difficult job for somebody to do.
Yeah, we've got the cluster has a Facebook page. We don't put job openings up there, but it helps you keep up on what's going on in the industry. We have a blog, rrpc.me, where we put industry news up, about companies that are growing or new contracts that are issued or what have you. And then there's LinkedIn. There's a Rochester Regional Photonics Cluster. It's a moderated group. So what we do is we keep headhunters who are trying to recruit people from Rochester to move elsewhere in the optics industry. We keep them out. And, Chinese competitors that are trying to sell optics into Rochester, we keep them out. And everybody else that's enthusiastic and interested in the industry, from Florida to Washington and all across the country, we let them in. So if you put a request to join, you can add in there. I can't say there's a ton of activity in it, but what's remarkable is, I'll bump into people and they'll go, "Yeah, I was following that story that you had posted on." Nobody comments on stuff, but there's a lot of people are looking at what's happening in there. So those are other networking opportunities.
Good morning. My name's John Primo, and I actually work with Rochester. I'm the director of community and business. He answered for this because it's a scenario that's been around longer than we have. But one of the things we offer is, with job postings, we encourage folks to post their jobs with Rochester Works, because not only will it go automatically in front of the folks who are working with us, it goes to the Department of Labor. So it's kind of a hit in that fashion. But one of the issues that this kind of goes back to manufacturing years ago, is they would approach us and say, we don't have enough workers, we don't have enough job seekers. And the challenge for us was, when we go in, and talk to our workers and try to match them up, we didn't have the jobs posted in our system to refer or to match. And so it's kind of that quandary. And I think, Ali, this is probably obvious to you, is that you have resources as an employer that probably have been more successful than others, and quite frankly, you want to put your bang where your buck is, whatever the term is. But we do encourage, and I think it is an issue that if we put our heads together, that we could probably come up with and make it a little bit easier for folks who want to get into this industry, who want to pursue opportunities, to kind of narrow it down and focus on. The other issue, and then I'll quiet down, but the other issue too is that the jobs themselves, the titles, are not always obvious. And so even if you did a search or you're looking for, it's not always as simple as that. So coming up with a solution, I think maybe with the funds that come in and the opportunities that will rise from this wonderful opportunity, I think it might be, as a community, to help address some of those issues as well.
Hi, thank you so much. Question for you, Ali, since you're the manufacturer again. If interested and qualified people are wanting to apply over for optimax, what would your next steps be or recommendations be?
Sure. So on the table in the back, I've got a bunch of these handout pamphlets, okay? And there's a page on the back which identifies a few different things. A link to get to our careers page. We have an electronic application process which triggers the process of getting reviewed. But we also identify a lot of the skills that we're looking for, the jobs that we can associate with those skills, as well as specific academic background with jobs as well. So we tried to look at it from a couple different perspectives. I would encourage you to, on your way out, A, if you have any questions, or B, just grab one of these. It's got, I think, a good comprehensive breakdown of the types of things that we're looking for, as well as a link to our careers webpage. Yeah.
Okay. I work as a career counselor, so what I'm looking for is what's the pay scale for entry-level persons who earns the certificate at the certificate level versus the associate's program level, and also are the jobs going to be concentrated mostly in Monroe County, or is it going to expand across New York State?
Good questions. So there's a lot of different variables with someone with just a certificate, especially if they have a complementary background. So I'm going to give you some metrics based on someone with a high school degree, okay, who has maybe gone through a vocational program. So we'll bring somebody in at a base rate between $10 to $15 an hour. Okay, $20,000 to $30,000 a year to start. However, we also have a shift differential, which can be up to another 15% that you can add on top of that. We also offer profit sharing on a monthly basis. So 25% of the profits at Optimax gets paid back to the company. There's no commission plans for our sales team, our executives. It is a flat out 25% on a monthly basis gets paid back. So you got to look at total compensation. Includes benefits from just a profit sharing example. In good years, someone who has been with the company for more than 5 years would be basically considered fully vested. Every month there can be commas in your paychecks, additional bonus. And when we're not as profitable, there's not. But the intention is it's part of this. We work and celebrate as a team and get compensated as a team. So if you look at the base rate of $20,000 to $30,000, an additional 10 to 15% with a shift differential, you've got your profit sharing, which can be between $3,000 to $7,000 a year, in addition to overtime, in addition to 3 weeks of paid time off that you can cash out anytime throughout the course of the year. It starts to add up, but the expectation is that you will be learning aggressively, you'll be continuing to add more value, and that your earning potential will continue to grow very steeply over the first few years as you get into your groove and identify where your key placement is. We've got optics technicians making components that are making between $35 and $40 an hour as well. They've been with the company for 15 to 20 years, but the expectation is you can earn a pretty good living making these high quality components. But to start out, that's a high school graduate with a maybe they've gone through a precision machining certificate, or at Womoco or BOCES, where they've gone through some kind of technical trades orientation. So kind of a long-winded answer, but it's important. At least we're grounded from a high school student. Someone coming out with an associate's degree, if they have no other experience whatsoever or a certificate, then I would expect that to be within the $13 to $17 an hour range.
For advanced manufacturing companies, when we talk with students, usually coming out with a certificate, a one-year certificate program, it's in that $11, $12, $13 an hour range. If they're coming out with an associate degree, it could be that $14 to $15 an hour range is starting wages, with a lot of upward mobility. Is at least referring to, if you're willing to learn, you're willing to work harder, those jobs will get into the $20 and $25 an hour range.
Yeah, the upward mobility is. It's the hidden advantage. So there's people with 2-year degrees that are making 6 figures in Rochester. There's people that with 2-year degrees who started companies. There's people with certificates that are making really good money. But, nobody's going to hire someone straight out of the gate until they know exactly what they're getting and build that relationship. But people make very good money in this industry.
You include, when you look at wages, you've got to look at benefits too, because that's usually a big part of it. It's not just the wages, it's the benefits, the insurance, the vacation, time off, things of those sorts. That does add to the bottom line when you're looking at the total wage potential.
My question is, Department of Labor, do you guys offer on-the-job training, or will you train the individual once they come out of high school? Say, for instance, if they don't have the vocational training, can a high school student come straight to one of your businesses and say, look, I'm interested in this position, can you train me? Or that's one question. And then while you guys are, waiting for a building and doing what you need to do to get your building together, what should we as the consumers be doing in the meantime? Like, people need jobs. What should we be telling them as they're waiting for photonics and optics to come about? What should we be telling them to do to prepare themselves?
Well, what I was talking about earlier was the big announcement about Integrated Photonics Manufacturing Institute. So that's something that's in process, that's coming about. The optics and photonics industry is here and it's operational. I mean, it employs thousands and thousands of people in the region. in terms of on-the-job training, I think every one of the companies in the cluster does on-the-job training, but they still expect a candidate that shows up to have the kind of the 21st century skills of being able to, write and communicate, coherent emails, memos, things like that, work with teams of people, know how to use typical things like the Microsoft suite. If they know how to use Excel and they have a little bit of a math background and are not intimidated by that, that is definitely a plus. And then there's the stuff like enthusiasm, personal comportment. Somebody mentioned, they can't tell if you're going to show up every day until they say show up every day. And if people don't show up every day, they're going to fall out fast. They need people who understand that, if you start a new job and, within the first 3 weeks you have 4 sick days, people understand if you're sick, but if it becomes a pattern, you're out. They need people that are in a team. So it's a combination of kind of 21st century benchline skills plus the soft skills that make people good members of a team.
Something that I'd like to add to that, here at Rochester Works, we offer something called Work Keys. Some of you may be familiar with it, some may not. But it's a really good way to prove to employers that you have the skills and abilities that they're looking for. It is here at Rochester Works. We have some other resources called ProveIt.com. That we offer to help you prove to employers that you are for the position. You always meet with a career services advisor downstairs, and they can get you started with that process.
Thanks for the plug, Miranda.
Does anyone have
I don't know if it's appropriate, but I was sharing an anecdote here before we began. 2 weeks ago, I spoke to the Optical Society of America, which incidentally started in Rochester in the 30s and the 20s, and now has a $75 million endowment and their own building on DuPont Circle in Washington, D.C. But they have a local chapter, and the local Optical Society of America chapter is the most active chapter in the country. And they asked me to speak to them, and I'm always amazed that people even want to hear from what I have to say. But I went and I did my Tom Batley thing. And afterwards, a guy comes up to me and says, I'm one of the guys who found out about the industry because you're always promoting the industry. I wouldn't have even heard about it, but I got to tell you, I started working at Optimax a few months ago. I never would have heard of them if you weren't promoting the industry. I love my job. I love the people I work with. I'm excited about going to work every day. Every day my job is a little bit different. I work with different people on different projects. It's cool. It sounded kind of like he's working like he's at a maker fair. He just loves his job. So, and I'd say, if I had to guess, I'd say the guy was in his mid to late 40s, something like that. Really enthusiastic. So he walks away. Another guy walks up to me who presents himself to me kind of like a pill. I just thought I'd give you the real dope on the optics industry. They don't pay well. A guy can't make, a guy with experience can't make the kind of money he wants to make. How's a guy supposed to earn a living? I've worked at all the companies. None of them pay worth a damn, blah, 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 blah. And I'm thinking, I probably know 2,000 people in this industry, from people who work on the shop floor and love their job, to people who are salespeople, to people who own companies or whatever. I know for a fact that what this guy is presenting to me reflects his personal experience, but I could not help, after I finally said, the only thing I could recommend to you after everything you've said to me is start your own business. And there's people who are doing that who are very successful, and if you have the skills you're saying you've got, you're not going to be happy working for someone else. Start your own business. So he said, yeah. He walked away. 5 minutes later, he's talking to the same a circle of people over in the corner, and it's the same thing. I can see he's like, optics industry sucks. Guy can't get. And I'm thinking, I know why the guy can't make the money. I can see this is what he brings when he shows up, right? I feel like, I can't tell this guy, look, take a pill, man. You need like a motivational program. You need something. But you go to, that guy goes to interview with Allie. He could have 30 years experience, and Allie's going to look at him and go, that guy is poison to my company. I'm not hiring him. So I don't know if that's relevant, but I mean, people need to be enthusiastic and excited about their future. And if this guy is the guy who's like, I've worked in the industry for 20 years. You owe me a job, and it better pay $60,000 a year. Well, nobody wants to talk to that guy. I felt bad for him.
I'm humble. I appreciate that. Honestly, Tom, I appreciate you approaching this earlier, but I just wanted to expand, and I had the pleasure of stopping by your group last week during the
at Optimax.
downtown.
All right.
You mentioned about sales and maybe translatable skills, relationship building. I'm a seasoned sales business development professional. Is there opportunities now, and really beyond some of the initial networking conversation you had, what additional direction could you provide? Because I know there's other people like me.
I think it's networking. I think there's not a single company in the cluster that's not interested in people that can sell and develop more business. What they really want to know is, do you understand the industry? Do you already have a network in the industry that might be able to help? And, what transferable experience do you have that might make you a good strategic investment for the sales team? For instance, I can talk about optics and photonics like crazy and be, super enthusiastic, but I'm not sure I could go from optics company to optics company and say, hey, look, I'm a good salesman. You ought to hire me. I just don't know if that would work. Maybe it would, but I don't know the answer. So I think it's relationship building, and I think there's a lot of opportunities. When you said met last week, so you went to OptiFab at the convention center. That was a great move to make, and they had right. It was sold out. Right. And then there was a job fair on Thursday there. I don't know. And okay. So there are opportunities like that in Rochester, and I know MCC hosts some. I have to admit, I don't know everything about the networking and job fair opportunities associated with advanced manufacturing and optics, but I know that there's a lot of that stuff going on in the region. It goes back to this guy's question: is where's the clearinghouse? How do you know about it? I guess the best I've got right now is do your research on our website and go to the LinkedIn page and try and connect to the Rochester Regional Photonics Cluster, and post stuff and try and create conversations around subject matter that you are very good at. And people start to notice people who are very, very good at certain things and seem to have insight into certain things. I know that job offers have been made. I was on a tour at Sidor with a networking session that we did, and a guy who just signed up for the networking session came in for a job interview the next week and got hired. So I know some of it is just being at the right place at the right time.
Yeah, Tom, I want to expand on that because tours are extremely important. To get back to your question, yes, we hire high school kids, we train them. On-the-job training is a very important part of this process. It's part of this lifelong learning journey. But to get into these companies, reaching out to them to, request a tour. The FAME organization has a very big initiative to coordinate tours into advanced manufacturing companies. There's optics companies involved in this organization as well. So I would encourage you to attempt to go in and see these companies for yourself. Sometimes that gives you the opportunity, even if it's on a tour, to really understand the environment, start to learn a little bit about the culture, and you get that vibe in your gut as to, is this the right environment for me? We bring students in all the time, job shadows, internships, co-ops, and you'll find a lot of these organizations are willing to provide you with those opportunities. So use that in your dialogue as you're reaching out to these companies to further explore potential opportunities.
I think another thing that's important is there are a lot of companies out there. A lot of people think the manufacturing in this area is dead because of the Xerox and Kodak cutback. But as Tom was pointing out, a lot of those companies folks have gone to start out their own companies. The Rochester is rich with small to medium-sized companies. There's a lot of them out there. They're looking for workers. There's companies that have to turn away work because there aren't enough people there to fulfill the jobs. So there are a lot of companies in the area. Don't think that there's only one or two Optimaxes or one or two manufacturing centers. There are a lot of them in the area, anywhere from 5 people to 250 people strong. So explore that avenue. Don't think you can only go to 1 or 2 companies in each technology. There's a lot of them out there. Rochester is rich in manufacturing.
Some of them, you go in and you can tell when you walk in the front door, you would never want to work there in a million years. Really, I mean, it's about a fit, and it's tough. I know when you're looking for work, you go into a place and they have a job opening, and you're going through the interview, and you're thinking to yourself, I don't know if I can make myself come here to work. Seriously, it's not. But there are others that are incredibly enlightened and team-oriented and exciting places to work. So I go back to the thing of finding a good fit for both companies, the company and the person.
Well, thank you guys so much for attending today's careers panel. Thank you to our panelists for giving up their time, giving up their knowledge and their industry expertise.